ビデオ
I'd like to start this video off by talking about my personal history with anime. I may call myself a retro anime fan, but I was never really that involved with early otaku culture because, well, I was simply too young for that. I was a child of the 90s, meaning that the very first anime I actively became a fan of was Pokemon. Throughout most of the late 90s to the early 2000s, the only anime I considered myself a fan of was whatever anime I could catch on TV. I never really had the itch to go and seek out anime titles on my own. This was because A, there was and still is a lot of anime in existence and I didn't know where to start, and B, this was back in the days where 90% of anime came in those $30 DVDs that only contained 4 episodes, and I wasn't willing to spend what little money I had on those. So for most of my early to mid-teens, the only anime I watched was stuff from Toonami, Adult Swim, Kids WB, and Foxbox. That changed in 2007 when, on the recommendation of other anime watching friends, I finally decided to seek out anime on my own. Most of this anime was either dark, TV-unfriendly jams like Paranoia Agent, Elfen Lied, and Higurashi, or popular anime that hadn't yet made it over and could only be watched on YouTube with each episode divided into 3 parts like Lucky Star. But in the summer of 2009, I had an epiphany. Most of the television anime that I had grown up on and had an immediate attached to came from the same time period. Shows like Dragon Ball, Yu Yu Hakusho, and G Gundam were all from that late 80s, early 90s period, and I wanted to know what other animes came out around that time. So I decided to look for DVDs of popular anime that came out around that time, which was easier said than done because the anime distribution industry had just burst into flames last year, and thus it was very hard to find then out-of-print classics like Tenchi Muyo and Pat Labor that year. But I ended up lucking out and I found 2 anime box sets that would lead me down the road to appreciating retro anime. One was season 1 of Ranma 1/2, and the other was a spur-of-the-moment buy for $20 at my local FYE. I'll let the anime in question speak for itself.
Where monsters rampage, I'm there to take them down. Where treasure glitters, I'm there to claim it. Where an enemy rises to face me, victory will be mine!
1995 Slayers was, is, and shall ever remain to be one of my all-time favorite animes ever made. It is a classic both as an anime and as a fantasy story. It is one of my go-to animes for when I just want to kick back, relax, and just watch some good wholesome entertainment. Like most fantasy anime at the time, Slayers began as a popular light novel series written by Hajime Kanzaka and illustrated by Rui Araizumi. It was very well received at the time and is still going to this day. But out of all subsequent adaptations, it is this anime that has reached the most people worldwide, especially in America. It was pretty much a gimme that Slayers was destined to succeed with American nerds given its subject matter. It is a lighthearted fantasy romp through a world that both parodies and pays homage to the tropes of Dungeons & Dragons, weaving the trials and tribulations of a ragtag adventuring party, the greedy, short-fused sorceress Lena Inverse, the strong, dim-witted swordsman Gauri Gabriev, the earnest yet hopelessly naive white mage Princess Amelia Will Tesla Seirun, and the grouchy, stoic half-demon Zelgadis Greywords. And we join them as they slay monsters, plunder treasure, get into petty squabbles, eat and drink themselves silly, and carve out numerous paths of destruction in their wake, usually by means of Lena's trademark spell, the Dragon Slave. Or to put it more simply, through an old anime adage, Record of Lodoss War is what people want to imagine their D&D campaigns are like. Slayers is what most D&D campaigns are actually like. And even with the glut of most fantasy anime nowadays being defined by MMORPG mechanics and trapped in another world cliches, Slayer still has the place in the hearts of otaku. It is still considered one of the definitive animes of the 90s. And I'd like to know why. What is it really about Slayers that captured the hearts of nerds across the globe? Even though I've seen this anime a multitude of times, I'm going to do a deep dive and see how the first season of this anime has really held up these past 20 years or so. Well, first, let's start off by looking at what really hasn't held up to modern standards. The animation. It holds up about as well as a mid-90s low-budget anime made in the midst of a crippling recession can, meaning that if this is your first time watching this anime, then strap in for some cost-saving animation tricks. Pop on an episode and take a shot every time you see speed lines, still frames, frozen crowd shots, postcard memories, and reused footage. You'll wake up in a gutter somewhere. And believe me when I say reused footage, because if there is a well animated scene for something that is used more than once, you will see that animation again. They get a lot of mileage out of that animation sequence of Lena casting the Dragon Slave. But I honestly don't think it's entirely the team's fault, because it feels like they were trying to make the best with the time and budget they were given. Which honestly doesn't seem like much, because you can see the rare animation mistakes creep through up to and including forgetting to paint some of the cells. When the animation is allowed to go beyond its budget, it's actually put to good use. Since 3/4 of the main party are primarily spellcasters, the animators put a lot of effort into making the casting of spells look interesting. The hand motions are usually well animated enough to show that the casting of a single fireball is the result of years of study and training, and the power behind each spell reflects that. Sword fighting animation is a bit lacking, however. They usually just involve the two fighters clashing their weapons and don't really evolve from there. They only really get interesting when Gowry brings out his trademark Sword of Light, which honestly feels more like a spell rather than a sword, which I guess kind of explains why they put a lot more effort into animating that than the real swords. And yet the bad animation is not a deal breaker, because Slayers is not a pure fantasy. The hook of Slayers is based on its jocular nature. It wants to be a goofy adventure story, and given that it is transitioning from a written medium to a visual one, it has been given the chance to show off its funny bone. The art of Slayers is not afraid to go off model to make the characters look sillier and more cartoony. The more cartoony the character, the funnier the slapstick. And Slayers knows how to get creative with the slapstick, taking full advantage of its animated medium to deliver a lot of good visual gags. But at the same time, it's not all jokes. Slayers wants to strike a balance between a serious Dungeons & Dragons campaign and cartoonish wackiness. And it does a good job at that. Despite its budget, the setting does not feel like a theme park version of a Dungeons & Dragons world, but an actual living, breathing world built on countless millennia of lore. And it's so detailed the anime will take the time to explain it all, delivering such important information such as where does magic come from, or why this person is so important, or why this spell is so destructive if you cast it wrong. And the anime knows how and when to shift the tone. Whenever the group confronts a very powerful enemy, the anime will let us know by having the color palette darken and the music swell to signify that our heroes are about to fight a battle of epic proportions. It doesn't always stay serious for long though. Slayers takes itself seriously as a story, but not too seriously. Even the most serious of fights will have its share of face faults, wacky injuries, and snarky one-liners. It even gets to the point where the characters just flat out acknowledge it.
Too bad, I was ready for the show to be over.
Well, they can't let these episodes be serious for too long.
But jokes are more of the seasoning rather than the entree. They're there to remind you that despite all the drama, you are still watching a lighthearted, fun fantasy. It would be the kind of direction that One Piece would soon master years later. But what makes Slayers so special is the characters. I can say without bias that the characters are the most memorable aspects of the anime franchise. They are the sugar that makes Slayers taste so sweet. The four characters have such flawed, unique personalities and yet still manage to be so damn likable. There is a reason why Lena Inverse is one of the most enduring female protagonists of anime.
You're gonna eat those words. I'm not the wimpy little girl you think you know. There's some little witch going around about my height, same outfit.
Shut up!
I'm sorry, Daddy. I'll do what you say and be a good girl.
Good, you understand.
You're hurting me, Daddy.
What makes Lena Inverse so special is how she is so unlike many other anime girls. She is not a sidekick or a love interest, but the main character who is also the leader of the team. She's also not your typical spellcaster archetype. She's not a bookish nerd or a demure, I'll try my best to help my team type, but a pure firecracker. She's short-tempered, loud, materialistic, and blessed with the appetite of the average shonen hero. But those traits don't detract from the fact that Lena is firmly on the side of good and will always do the right thing, even if she does ask for payment up front.
How much is it worth to you if I can get rid of this dragon?
We would gladly pay 20 gold pieces.
Make it 30.
That's robbery!
Pay it or this place is a lumberyard.
She's probably the most realistic portrayal of an adventurer without being a complete cynical takedown of the archetype. That's what makes Lena so relatable. Quests aren't quests to her, but jobs. Jobs that she wants payment for, and she will get pissed if she doesn't get her money.
Don't worry, you'll get a handsome reward when we return to Seirun.
Seirun? Seirun's nowhere near where we are now! I don't want to go all the way to Seirun, it'll take forever!
Then we have Gowry, the dumb muscle. When creating a character whose defining personality trait is their stupidity, you walk a fine line. Make them too stupid and they become unrelatable and at worst, a liability. Make them not stupid enough and this could lead to inconsistent character writing. Gowry is the appropriate level of dim.
Oh, thanks a lot for the big choice you're giving us!
Death or slavery to a devil.
Slave works for me.
On one hand, he is extraordinarily competent as far as sword fighting goes. On the other, he is a forgetful, easily distracted dunce who cannot absorb anything that's happening in front of him for long periods of time. A source of endless frustration for his teammates who are constantly aghast at his depths of stupidity.
So do you understand it now?
Not at all.
And his inability to remember anything is valuable in how the story is told because it allows exposition and world building to be delivered by means of the characters trying to explain things to an empty-headed idiot.
Gowry, don't you listen to anything I tell you. The Philosopher's Stone is hidden inside of it. And before you even ask, the stone's a fragment of the Staff of the Gods that holds up the world. And it works like a super magic amplifier. So it's something that can control the whole world.
But unlike Lena, who is very selfish in her motivations, and unlike Gowry, who just goes along with Lena, we have Amelia, who genuinely wants to be a selfless hero of justice.
Soulless fiend who thrives on evil. Taste now the swift sword of justice!
She is kind of annoying when her only character trait is her hero for justice shtick, but she really starts coming into her own once she officially joins Lena's group as both the heart and occasional burden of the squad. This ends up creating a good character dynamic between her and the rest of the cast because it allows her to be both a naive kid.
We gave you all our money to buy food. Oh, I see what you mean. And I went and ruined all the food, right? Oh.
Or the sanest head in the room.
Real food, Gowry.
Oh yes, Lena. Real food.
These guys are scaring me.
And finally, we have Zelgadis, the only main character in this anime who is taking his role seriously. He also has a great dynamic with the rest of the crew by virtue of being a mysterious stone-cold badass, get it, on a team of clowns. He's that kid on your D&D team who created this cool, mysterious character and is constantly trying not to get roped into the antics of the other players as they attempt to seduce the barmaid. He is the Piccolo of the group.
Amelia, anyone who judges people by the way they look alone really gives justice a bad name, right, Zell?
Excuse me?
But since he appears the least out of the main four, his character still feels under construction. We really won't get to see Zelgadis shine as a comedic character until the next season. But what breathes life into these characters is the voiceover cast, specifically of the English dub. If you want to get the true Slayers experience, I highly suggest you watch it dubbed. However, for this season, there is an important caveat. The dub of Slayers has been considered one of the more exceptional dubs of the 1990s, but you wouldn't know that by listening to the first half of the anime. It's not atrocious, but it is typical of the types of dub that Central Park Media was putting out in that era. And it's honestly become a black mark on an otherwise pretty good dub. It was so noticeably less than stellar that back when Funimation got the distribution rights, they were seriously considering re-recording the dub of the first 13 episodes. For one thing, the voice direction is all over the place. The majority of the cast don't feel like they have a good grasp of what their characters are supposed to be, so the recordings of their lines sound really awkward, like they are trying to force the emotion behind the script, and it results in some lines coming off as very unnatural.
This is no time to pat myself on the back.
Hooray! I finally got him to laugh! Da-da-da-da-da-da-da!
If I would have known this was gonna happen, I would have stayed in an inn.
Also, the localizers for the first few episodes really wanted to add more jokes to the script, which is understandable. Punching up a script can actually do wonders for an anime, but they didn't really understand when and where to put these jokes, so they come off as unfunny non sequiturs that come out of nowhere.
You made this yourself?
Yeah, well...
Hey, Lena, can you make me a cheeseburger?
But probably the most infamous of growing pains the Slayers dub had was the first casting choices of Zelgadis and Amelia. At first, Daniel Cronin as Zelgadis does a pretty okay job when Zelgadis is this mysterious figure with a quiet voice.
That is correct. It's an item I believe you acquired in your recent encounter with the Dragon Fangs.
But as soon as he has to emote, he just gives up.
Silence!
So, you finally had enough guts to show up in person, eh, Zagildos?
My name is Zelgadis.
But he is still leagues better than Joni Baker as Amelia.
Miss Lena, I didn't realize how famous you were, and that you're such a true defender of good against evil.
She is just horrendous. She sounds like Madonna's character in Who's That Girl with a Nasty Head Cold. Her voice was one of the reasons early fans of Slayers despised Amelia. I mean, who could blame them? Would you like a character who had this annoying squawk of a voice?
My hero!
Thankfully, they get better at this. Most likely recognizing the poor reception, Central Park Media replaced Baker with the infinitely more palatable Veronica Taylor.
Wait, no, please. We're on the side of justice. We aren't villains, really!
Veronica Taylor's performance really helps underline the innocence and sincerity of her character. Her voice reflects that of a wannabe do-gooder who is desperately trying her best despite her choice of company.
I don't know who you really are, but my righteous blood is boiling. Your evil shall be!
Shut up and stay out of this!
But I already climbed up here!
And Daniel Cronin gets replaced by a young, soon-to-be immortal Crispin Freeman.
What are you people doing?
He really captures the whole surly, put-upon badass that's constantly fed up with the group's inanity. In other words, the perfect straight man.
Oh, I almost forgot. This creepy-looking guy is Zelgadis.
You are pointing.
Eric Stewart as Gowry does an excellent job in making him the dopey yet well-meaning swordsman he is supposed to be.
It's still raw! Why can't these things cook faster?
And even when he delivers his line with some flatness, it's kind of endearing and almost in character. Yasunori Matsumoto does a good hot-blooded warrior voice, but I never got that impression from Gowry. He's a lovable idiot, even when he's fighting the forces of evil. But the real star is Lisa Ortiz as Lena Inverse.
See, I'm not such a basket case all the time. Oh, now it's lunchtime. Where are those fish?
It's amazing that her second voice acting role ever became her most iconic, and for good reason. She plays Lena with a hint more grouchiness and aggressiveness than the original Japanese.
I can't believe how stupid you are. He'll only let us live if we help him destroy the world. Don't you understand that?
Okay, relax!
And I know Megumi Hayashibara's performance as Lena is one of her most iconic roles next to Rei, and I'm not discounting her. She also does an excellent job at being foul-tempered. But Hayashibara's performance as Lena is meant to sound a whole lot more cuter. When she's angry, it's like a kitten clawing at your pants leg. When Lisa Ortiz gets angry, it's like a cat clawing your face off.
Hey, Lena! My ass!
I give up!
Angry is not just all Lisa Ortiz has for Lena, however. She also nails every other emotion Lena shows, whether that be sarcastic,
Oh, we're doomed! Yeah, right. Whatever.
confident,
We all agreed we'd fight him together, so no going solo, okay?
or just completely dazed and confused.
Koala.
But probably her most standout performance is whenever she has to recite the incantation for Lena's trademark Dragon Slave. She delivers the speech with such conviction and seriousness that it almost sounds like she's going to cast in the recording booth right then and there.
Power beyond the twilight and crimson blood that flows, buried in the stream of time, is where your power grows. I pledge myself to conquer all the foes who stand against the mighty gift bestowed in my unworthy hand. Dragon Slave!
So you got great characters that are fully realized by great actors in a fully developed setting. All we need now is a story. Now this season can be divided up into 4 parts. The Red Priest arc, which is an adaptation of the first novel, not only serves as an introduction to the world of Slayers, but also tells the story of Lena and Gowry's first adventure. in which they are pursued by the minions of the mysterious Rezo, the Red Priest, who wishes to summon the Dark Lord Ruby-Eyed Shabernigdo in a last-ditch effort to cure his blindness, which leads into the Sai Rag arc, the shortest arc of the bunch, in which Lena is tasked with protecting the large pacifistic Prince Phil and his daughter Amelia, future party member and younger sister of Princess, not appearing in this anime. Which leads into the Road to Sai Rag arc, which mostly is a goofy filler arc that follows the mishaps of Lena and the gang trying to get from Sai Rag to Sai Rag. And finally, the Sai Rag arc, which can be summed up as Lena and the crew cleaning up the mess they made after facing the Red Priest. As stated before, the Red Priest arc is a full-on adaptation of the first novel. As far as I know, very little was changed, and I think it kinda suffers as a result. For most of the first episode, the story feels very directionless, meandering, and at times padded. An egregious example would be the first half of the second episode that is devoted to a lengthy scene where Lena is surveying the treasures she stole in the first episode and preparing them for sale at a nearby magic shop. It's not a pointless scene because it establishes MacGuffins that will be important later on, but it definitely feels more suited for a novel format, not a visual format where the scene just goes on forever.
Hurry up, Lena, because this is pretty boring.
It also doesn't help that for at least 1/3 of the arc, Lena is in a depowered state and can't really do much because of, well...
Oh, that time of the month.
Let's not talk about this!
It's that time of the month girls don't like to talk about. When all the priestesses and sorceresses start losing all of their powers. Gee!
How does a guy with the brains of a jellyfish know all about that time of the month?
Most of the arc really is just a means to establish both the characters, their abilities, and the world around them. But once it actually gets going, the arc really knows how to ramp things up for a satisfying climax where Shabernigdo merges with Rezo, and Lena has to defeat him by drawing on the power of the ruler of all creation, the Lord of Nightmares, unleashing the most powerful spell in existence, the Giga Slave. And with that climax, it ends solidly, coming to a nice conclusion with Lena and Gowry off on their next adventure with the Sai Rag arc. The Sai Rag arc is almost not worth discussing because it's so short and it only serves to introduce Amelia and kick off the Sai Rag arc as a whole. It's also kind of the worst written because it almost feels like the writing staff is just spinning their wheels, trying to figure out where does the anime go from here after the Red Priest arc. It seems like instead of going chronologically and having Lena and Gowry head to Atlas City where they were going to in the first place, the writers wanted to skip ahead to the fourth book where most of the events of the Sai Rag arc are drawn. But they only take elements from that story, like the plot is trying to figure out an assassination plot against Prince Phil, and that ends up getting solved at the end of the first episode of the arc. So the plot proceeds to wander aimlessly for an episode until they enter Sai Rag, which they stay in for all of one episode. That episode is where the plot of the Sai Rag arc is introduced. It starts with Lena learning that she has a bounty on her head and she wants to figure out why. After fighting off hordes of soldiers and wannabe heroes, two mysterious figures approach her and Gowry, the swordsman Zangulus and the wizard Vroomagain. They want Lena to come with them to Sai Rag for reasons they won't explain, and they will take her, dead or alive. Naturally, after some fight scenes, Lena and Gowry decide to immediately head for Sai Rag and see whatever is there that can clear their names, with Amelia tagging along. And if you were watching this back in the day, it would be understandable to have been dreading the next arc, because Amelia's character does not have the best introduction in this arc. Aside from Joni Baker's voice, she is a nuisance at best and a liability at worst. Her personality is solely focused on her total devotion to justice to an incredibly annoying degree. And for a while she only exists to expedite the conflict of the episode, such as when she begs Lena to show her the dragon slave and it ends up unleashing a horde of evil ghosts sealed in a hill, or when she finds out about Lena's bounty and immediately turns on her, helping Zangulus and Vroomagain. If they had kept this direction for her character, it probably would have killed any long-term interest in the franchise. But thankfully, they right the course with her to just being a naive kid who wants to do her best in the Road to Sai Rag arc. Despite being what most would call a filler arc, the Road to Sai Rag arc is actually right when the anime starts coming into its own. Starting off with an episode that is just one Wile E. Coyote style chase scene between our heroes, a group of bandits, and the two bounty hunters helps this anime settle into its groove of being a goofy fantasy adventure, and it only gets goofier from there. This arc is full of shenanigans, such as cross-dressing, sham weddings, and Lena having to participate in a play where she is a villainous monster.
My name is Lena, the embodiment of evil, the source of misfortune. Come forth, my lovely dragon slave.
Gowrie, wrong foot!
Doing it
Would
wrong,
you get
Lena.
with it?
Come on.
No, the other foot!
But what keeps this from being a mere filler arc is that our heroes are constantly being pursued by Zangulus and Vroom-again. By having them there, the episodic nature of this arc still ties into the main story. This arc is important because it welds the Sai Rag arc and the Sai Rag arcs together, and thus is not the pointless filler arc it could have been. And finally, we get to the Sai Rag arc. So remember how I said that the Sai Rag arc is Lena and the crew having to clean up the mess they made in the wake of killing Rezo the Red Priest? Yeah, it turns out you can't just kill a very powerful legendary priest without some blowback. In Sai Rag, a woman named Eris has set up shop, and is the person who put the bounty on Lena's head. The reason for this is because she is one of Rezo's most ardent followers, and finding out that Lena killed her lord and master regardless of what good reason she had for doing so, did not sit well with her at all. After a fight scene where we learn that Eris is perfecting the art of making magical clones, we get a visitor. Turns out that Eris has made a copy of Rezo and seeks to make him exactly like the real Rezo. All she's missing is the real Rezo's legacy, which is hidden in his secret laboratory. This is the signal that Lena and the gang need to find that legacy before Eris does, and fast. Joining the gang finally is Zelgadis, who's hoping that the legacy will turn him human again, and the demure shrine maiden, Sylphil. Voicing Sylphil is Stacia Crawford, who, to her credit, can do sweet and reserved shrine maiden fairly well.
I've been so worried that something awful is about to happen here in Sai Rag.
Unfortunately, that's all she can do. She sounds like she was forced to read her lines after being dragged out of bed at 4 AM without being given a cup of coffee, and she has to emote a lot in this arc. Her reaction when Copy Rezo destroys her hometown of Sai Rag in a display of power, killing her father and everyone she's ever known as a result, is nothing short of side-splitting.
Father! Father! My father! No!
Anyways, when Sai Rag is destroyed, Lena and her friends regroup and decide they are going to have to destroy Copy Rezo, regardless whether they get the legacy or not. Lena suggests casting the Giga Slave like last time, but Sylphil refuses, saying Lena should never cast that spell ever again.
It's a terrible spell that can return all creation to nothingness. If you were to miscast the spell, it wouldn't just kill us. It could consume the entire world in a void of nothingness.
So it looks like they're gonna have to play it by ear then. After a series of fights between an army of chimera, a high-flying fishman, a final confrontation with Zangulus, and a demon chicken,
Chicken!
they soon find out what the legacy is. It turns out Rezo did have a plan when Shabranigda was summoned, and as soon as his blindness was cured, he was prepared to battle him by summoning the power of the great beast Xanathar, sealed in the Great Treef Lagoon that stands in Sai Rag. Unfortunately, they get there too late, with Rezo stealing back the legacy and killing Eris in the process. It turns out his true motivation is that he wants to surpass the original Rezo by killing the ones who defeated him by any means necessary. And I have to agree, because Copy Rezo is an infinitely more compelling villain than the original Rezo because he is way more proactive. Instead of relying on henchmen, he wants to get his own hands dirty, and he does it with such style and flair. What then follows is a climactic battle that brings all the elements introduced in this season together. Everyone is throwing their most powerful spells at Copy Rezo. Neither one is giving an inch. Lena even tries to use the Giga Slave at one point, but chooses not to in favor of protecting Sylphil. This leaves her mortally wounded, and it is up to Sylphil to save her.
No! Please hang on. Hang on, Lena. Please.
Yeah, Sylphil's role hasn't exactly aged as well as all the others. But once Lena is back in action, she is given the Blessed Blade, a sword blessed with holy power that Lena can use against Kabirezo. It is effective, but Lena cannot do it alone. Everyone in their party combines their strengths together, using their best abilities and teamwork to take down Kabirezo and Xanathar. In the end, showing us that even after all the humor, Slayers can still end on a legitimately exhilarating finish. All in all, even with the problems that are more evident today, Slayers still stands head and shoulders above many current fantasy anime. Even with its parodic mood and devil-may-care attitude, there's nothing cynical about it. It prescribes to the idea that fantasy can be good old-fashioned fun and excitement, and does so with much sincerity. But still, the first season does take a while to warm up. In some ways, it can be seen more as a season-long pilot rather than an actual anime. There's a lot of testing the waters, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And even if it does lead to an exciting climax, getting to that point was a long, hard road. It's still a good anime, and I highly recommend it to anyone, but these are the things that you need to keep in mind when watching the first season. It has to take a few stumbling baby steps before going into a full-blown sprint. Not the perfect beginning, but definitely an alright start. But luckily for you and me, things do get better. Next year, baby!